Hi there, thanks for joining me here on JKD Handmade for another tutorial where I'll be showing you how to make this crochet cardigan. It's worked in panels. There's a back panel, two front panels, and then the sleeves, collar and bottom ribbing is worked directly onto the cardigan. I work this pattern according to body measurements, which you'll find in the pattern as you go along, and the sizes are from child 2 years to adult 5XL. For the materials, you will need yarn. I'm using the Super Soft Iron, which is a category 4 worsted weight. This is 100% acrylic, and the recommended hook on the yarn label is a 5mm hook. For my cardigan, which was a size medium, and for the length that I had made it at, I used 850 grams. You'll need two hooks, a 6mm hook and a 5mm hook. The 6mm hook we'll use for most of the cardigan. The 5mm hook we'll use for the ribbing on the sleeves only. You'll need a yarn or wool needle, a pair of scissors, a measuring tape and stitch markers. We'll begin with the back panel. Form a slip knot. To start off our panels, we'll work a foundation double crochet. So here goes, chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those 3 stitches, the 1, 2, 3 counts as our first stitch. So to work our next stitch, it's yarn over, insert the hook into that first chain that we had worked, pull up a loop, yarn over and go through 1 loop on the hook. Now you'll see that we formed a little chain here, and that becomes the start of our next stitch. I always sort of place my fingers on that to guide me along. Then it's yarn over, go through 2 loops on the hook, yarn over, go through 2 loops on the hook. We've now formed our second stitch. Then to continue on, it's yarn over, insert your hook into that little chain that we had formed, going through both loops from that chain, pull up a loop. You have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, go through only 1 loop on the hook, and here you formed the next chain, which will be the start of our next stitch. Then it's yarn over, go through 2 loops on the hook, yarn over, go through 2 loops on the hook. So here we formed our third stitch. Then it's yarn over, insert your hook into that little chain that we had formed, going through both loops from that stitch, yarn over, through, you have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, go through only 1 loop on the hook, and here you form the start of our next stitch, yarn over, go through 2 loops on the hook, yarn over, go through 2 loops on the hook. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches, and you continue on to complete your foundation round. So I've continued on with my foundation round. Now this is a lot shorter than yours would be. I'm just working a sample. You will need to work a foundation round for the length of your cardigan. So you would physically measure this against your body from the shoulder going all the way down to the upper hip or to the lower hip, however long or short you'd like your cardigan. I've just worked a sample here. I've only worked 18 stitches. Now, once you've worked your foundation round, you'll need to count the number of stitches and adjust your stitch count to a multiple of 3. For my actual cardigan, I had worked 90 stitches, and that's a multiple of 3. You can either add on stitches or remove stitches to adjust that stitch count. Here I have 18 stitches for my sample. Continuing on with round 2, it's chain 2 and turn. that chain 2 counts as our first stitch, in this case a double crochet. Into the next stitch, work your next stitch, which is a double crochet. Then it's skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, into that next stitch, work 3 double crochets all into the 1 stitch. That's 1, 2, and 3. Then it's skip 2, 1, 2, into the next stitch, work 3 double crochets, 1, 2, 3. Skip 2, 1, 2, into the next stitch, work 3 double crochets, 1, 2, 3. Skip 2, 1, 2, into the next stitch, work 3 double crochets, 1, 2, 3, and then you continue on, but you've got a much longer way to work, so you'll continue on with skip 2, 3 double crochets, skip 2, 3 double crochets, and when you get to the end, you'll skip 2, 1, 2, and into those last 2 stitches, you'll work a double crochet each. So that's 1 double crochet, and then into that last stitch, my last double crochet. So you've ended off with 2 double crochets. Round 3, chain 2 and turn. Into the next stitch, work a double crochet. Then it's chain 2, 1, 2. Then into those 3 stitches that we have worked together from the round before, we'll work a double crochet 3 together. So that's the name of the stitch. It's DC3TOG. So here goes. It's yarn over, insert your hook into that first stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, and go through 2 loops on the hook. Then it's yarn over, insert your hook into the next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through 2 loops on the hook. Yarn over, insert your hook into the 3rd stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through 2 loops on the hook. You have 4 loops on your hook, and now you can yarn over and pull through to complete the stitch. So that's called a DC3 together. Then it's chain 2, 1, 2, and again we're working our stitch, a DC3 together. It's yarn over, insert your hook into that first stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through 2 loops on the hook, yarn over, insert your hook into the next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through 2 loops on the hook, yarn over, insert your hook into the 3rd stitch from that set of 3 stitches, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through 2 loops on the hook. Then it's yarn over and pull through all the loops on the hook. Chain 2. So you'll continue on with the stitch pattern to the end of the round. Again, you have a much longer way to go. So I'm on my last stitch now. I'll work that. When you get to the end, it's chain 2, and into those last 2 stitches, work a double crochet each. It's 1, and here's my last one. So we've ended off with 2 double crochets. Round 4, chain 2 and turn. Here we're working double crochets all across. So into that next stitch, we'll work a double crochet. Into this chain 1 space, you'll work a double crochet. And then here you see your stitches, so you'll work a double crochet into that stitch there. A double crochet into this next stitch. Then it's a double crochet into that chain space, a double crochet into that next stitch, and so on. You'll continue on with double crochets into all stitches and into all chain spaces. So once you get to the end, you'll work a double crochet into that chain space, and then there's a little stitch. So if you look at it, it's 1, 2, and here my chain 2 counts as a stitch, so I must end off with those 3 stitches. That's 1 there. Into this next double crochet, here's my next stitch, and into that chain 2. Into the second chain from chain 2 is my last stitch. So at the end of this round, especially make certain that your stitch count remains the same. In this case, for my sample, it's 18 stitches, but for my actual cardigan, I used 90 stitches. Then it's round 5, chain 2, and turn. I've continued on with round 5 and round 6, which were just double crochets into all stitches. So it's chain 2, turn, work double crochets for round 5, and then round 6, chain 2, turn, and double crochets all across. So this is our stitch pattern for our back panel and front panels. You'll continue on and you'll repeat round 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Here are the shoulder to shoulder measurements for the different sizes. Use the measurement for the size that you are working. You may pause the video to jot down the measurement. You will need these measurements to continue on with the pattern. I've continued on with the back panel, and here's my foundation double crochet. So then I worked round 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And thereafter I continued to repeat round 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on until the width of my back panel. So if you look at it, this is the length of my back panel, and going across this way, that's the width of my back panel. So when you measure the width of your back panel, that width must measure your shoulder to shoulder measurement plus 2 inches. So it's the shoulder to shoulder measurement for the size that you are working. In my case, it's a medium, so that's 16 inches or 40.5 centimeters, and then I've got to add on a further 2 inches, so that brings it to 18 inches or around 46 centimeters. So it's your shoulder to shoulder measurement plus 2 inches for the size that you are working. Do try to end your panels on a round of double crochets. So whether it's 1 round of double crochets, 2 or 3, that doesn't matter, just as long as it is one of those double crochet rounds. You may go slightly over the shoulder to shoulder plus 2 inches measurement. That won't make a big difference. You can then fasten off and set this aside. We'll now work the front panels. Here's my front panel, and all I've done was work a foundation round double crochet just as I had done for the back panel. Now I worked 90 stitches for my back panel, so I kept the stitch count the same at 90 stitches for my front panels. And then I worked round 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and here I repeated round 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 until the width of my front panel measures half the shoulder to shoulder measurement. So the shoulder to shoulder measurement for the size that I'm working is 16 inches, and half of that is 8 inches. So that's 8 inches or 20 centimeters. We'll then continue on working from the front panel without fastening off. So continuing on from that front panel without fastening off, it's chain 11. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We'll now work a little ribbing across, and for this I'm not changing my hook size. I've kept it on the 6mm hook. Into the second chain from the hook, single crochet. Continue with single crochets to the end of the chain. At the end of that chain, you should have 10 stitches. So that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Now we'll take this ribbing and we'll join it to our front panel, the edge of our front panel. So into that next stitch, slip stitch. Into the next stitch, slip stitch. Turn, round 2, continue on with single crochets into the back loops only, into all stitches. So those first 2 slip stitches, 1, 2, into those we will not work any stitches. Into that next stitch will be our first stitch for this round. So here, if you look at it, here's 1, 2 of those loops that make up a stitch, and we'll work all our stitches into the back loops only. So continue on with single crochets into the back loops only. Again, make certain that you have 10 stitches. So that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Then it's chain 1 and turn. Now this is the third round that we're working. Into all our stitches, we'll work single crochets. We'll work them into the back loops only. Make certain that you have 10 stitches. Then to attach the ribbing to our front panel, into that next stitch, slip stitch. Into that next stitch from the front panel, slip stitch. And then round 4, turn, skip the first 2 slip stitches, continue on with single crochets into the back loops only. Now I've continued on with the ribbing, and all I've done was repeat round 2 and 3 until I got to the end of my front panel. At this point you can fasten off and cut off the excess yarn. Go ahead and make 2 front panels as I have done here. So these are 2 identical front panels. So for the buttonholes, well, I didn't really want buttonholes and buttons on my cardigan, but here goes. I will show you how to get that done. Now, from what I know, buttons are when the cardigan's on our bodies, the buttons are always on the left panel on the cardigan. So make certain that you get the positioning or the placement of these buttons right. It must be on the panel that's going to be on the left side of your body. So you can go ahead and decide on the placement of these buttons. Now I'll use these ridges along my ribbing as a guide. So if I count 1, 2, maybe I'll put it here at the bottom on the third one. Then I'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, skip 5 ridges, and then place my next one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then place my next one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and place my next one, and so on. You can use your normal needle and thread to sew them on into place. So that's for the buttons, and now for the buttonholes. So this is going to be on the panel that's going to be on the right side of your body. Now for the buttonholes, you're going to work your panel exactly the same. You're going to work the ribbing in exactly the same way as the pattern shows. But as you're working your ribbing, you're going to align these panels to the left panel where you've already placed your buttonhole. Your button. Now for this here, you're going to, as you're working, when you place your panels together and you see that it lines up with your button, and you can also go ahead and count the ridges. Like here, I've got 1, 2. Let's just move a bit and try to zoom in here. Like here, if you look at it, I've got 1, 2. So I've worked 1, 2. And then for my third ridge here that you see along my ribbing, I know that I've got a button there. So I need to put in a buttonhole on this side. Now I've worked 1, 2, 3, 4 of my single crochets. And then it's going to be a chain 1. So that's chain 1. And I'll skip 1 stitch into the next stitch. I'll continue on with my single crochets into those back loops. So then I've got a little gap here that's slightly bigger than all the other gaps. And then you continue on. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you'll continue on with your ribbing, and then it's just following the pattern again, working that ribbing as I do in the pattern. Once you get to that chain 1 space right here, if you sort of find that you're losing your chain 1 spaces because it is quite small, you can always place a stitch marker right there into that stitch. And then don't forget to work your ribbing into that chain 1 as well, because you're continuing on with the ribbing until you get to your next buttonhole. And here's the buttonhole. So you can always test to see if your buttonhole is right. And you, like I said, you'd like it a bit on the tighter side so that your buttons don't come undone. Okay, so that's fine. So I'll just speed up a little to get to my next buttonhole. So here I've worked further on with my ribbing. So I'm using my ribbing on the left panel as a guide to work the right panel. So I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I have a button. So I've got 1, here's my first buttonhole, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this should be my next buttonhole right here. So again, when you're working your buttonholes, count the number of stitches that you work on either side of the buttonhole, so that you know that wherever you're placing your buttonholes, you're working the same number of stitches. It could be 4 single crochets and then a chain 1, skip 1, and then continuing on with single crochets, so that you know for when you get to your next buttonhole, you're working the same stitch count, 4 single crochets, and then it's your chain 1, skip 1 for your buttonhole, and then you're continuing on. So I just hope that that explains the buttons and buttonholes. So here I have my back panel laid out flat, and here's my first front panel. I'll take that front panel and align it on top of the back panel. I've aligned the edges, and here my ribbing is towards the center of that back panel. With yarn on the yarn needle, we'll go ahead and seam along the shoulders from one edge to about 2 inches before the ribbing. So here I'll stop my seaming at this point here. And here's the ribbing. So I'll leave that ribbing portion unseamed. You can start at one edge. Do the same on the other side. Here are the armhole depth measurements for the different sizes. You may pause the video to jot down the measurement for the size that you are working on. You will need this measurement as we move on with the pattern. Now that we have our shoulders seamed, we can go ahead and mark off the armhole depths. So on the one edge of your panels, you can, from the shoulder measuring downwards, mark off the armhole depth for the size that you are working. I'm working a size medium, so that's 7 inches or 18 centimeters, and you can mark off both layers with a stitch marker. Then I like to go ahead and count the number of stitches I've marked off, and I'll use the same stitch count to mark off my armhole depth on the other side, so that I have an equal number of stitches for my sleeves on either side. Now that we've marked off the armhole spaces on either side, we can go ahead and seam along the sides of the cardigan. I like to work from the bottom edge, working my way to the top, or at least to that stitch marker, marking off the armhole depth, leaving the armhole spaces unstitched. So here I've already stitched along the sides of my cardigan, and I've done the same on the other side as well, leaving these armhole spaces unstitched. With our panels in place, we'll now work the sleeves. So right here at the underarm is where we'll attach our yarn. Bring it in there. The stitch pattern is exactly the same as it is for our panels, except here we're working it in the round. So then it's chain 2, 1, 2, and we'll work double crochets all around the armhole space. I've worked my way to the end of round 1 for the sleeve. To complete the round, into the second chain from chain 2. So that's 1, 2, slip stitch to join. Then it's chain 2 and turn. Make certain to turn after every round. That way you keep your seam that runs down the sleeve in a straight line. Now before moving on, you need to count the number of stitches you have for round 1. And we need to adjust that stitch count to a multiple of 3. Now I've counted my stitches. I have 40 stitches. So the closest multiple to 3 is 39. And in order for me to get it to 39 stitches, I need to work 1 decrease. To work a decrease, it's yarn over, insert your hook into that first stitch, pull up a loop. You have 3 loops on your hook. Insert your hook into the next stitch, pull up a loop. You have 4 loops on your hook. Yarn over and go through 3 loops on the hook. Yarn over and go through 2 loops on the hook. And we've changed the 2 stitches into just 1 stitch. So that way, when I work round 2, I will have 39 stitches, which is a multiple of 3. So you go ahead, count the number of stitches and bring it to the closest multiple of 3 by working decreases. Now I choose to work my decreases at the start of the round, or sometimes if I have to work 2 decreases, I'll work 1 at the start and 1 at the end. So it's on either side of my chain 2. Continue on with double crochets to the end of the round. And then to end the round, into that second chain from chain 2, slip stitch to join. Now that we have our stitch count correct, you can go ahead and work those 2 cluster rounds. So it's chain 2 counts as our first stitch. Then it's skip the next 2 stitches, 1, 2, into that next stitch, work 3 double crochets, all into the 1 stitch. 1, 2, and 3. Here it is. Then you'll skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, and it's 3 double crochets into that stitch. So you'll continue on with skip 2, 3 double crochets into 1 stitch and to the end of the round. 1, 2, 3 double crochets. I've worked my way to the end of the round and I have 2 stitches to go. 1, 2. So into that same stitch from where that chain 2 comes out of, work 2 double crochets. You're skipping the 2 stitches in between. So that was 1, and here's my second. And into that second chain from chain 2, 1, 2, slip stitch to join. Then it's chain 2, 1, 2, and turn. For every round you will turn. That's just to avoid the line, the joining line, from going askew. Turning helps to keep that joining line straightened. So we've chained 2 and turn. Then we'll work our 3 double crochets all into 1. So here's my first double crochet. Then it's yarn over, insert your hook into that next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, and go through 2 loops on the hook. You have 2 loops on the hook. Then it's yarn over, insert your hook into the 3rd stitch from that cluster, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through 2 loops on the hook. You now have 3 loops on your hook. Then it's yarn over and go through all 3 loops on the hook. Then it's chain 2, 1, 2, and you'll work your 3 unfinished double crochets into these 3 double crochets that are worked together from the round before. Just as you had done for your front and back panels. Then it's chain 2, and you'll continue on with the pattern to the end of the round. I've worked my way to the end of round 4. So here it is, and I've worked my last 3 double crochets all worked into 1. Then I chain 2. So to end the round, it's into the second chain from chain 2, slip stitch to join. Then round 5, 1 chain 2 and turn. Now here we're working double crochets into all chain spaces and into all stitches, just as we had done for our front and back panels. Continue to the end of the round. Here I am at the end of the round. I also counted my stitches and made certain that my stitch count remained the same. Then into the second chain from chain 2, slip stitch to join. So to follow the stitch pattern, I need to work 2 more rounds of double crochet, and then I'll work my 2 rounds of 3 double crochet together. Continue on with the sleeve, repeating the stitch pattern. So I've worked my sleeve, and at this point when I fit on, it reaches about 2 inches before my wrist, and that's only because I'll be working a ribbing right at the end. So now you'll swap out your hook, the 6mm for the 5mm. Now the ribbing for the sleeve is exactly the same as we had worked the ribbing for our front panels, only this time we're working it in the round. So then it's chain 11, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Into the second chain from the hook, single crochet. Continue on with single crochets into all chains. So I've completed round 1 and I have 10 stitches. Make certain at all times that your stitch count remains the same. Now we need to join this part of the ribbing to our sleeve edge here. So if you look at it, here it is. So when I bring down my ribbing here, like so, into that next stitch, I'll slip stitch into that stitch. Then slip stitch into the next stitch. So you've worked 2 slip stitches, and then it's round 2 and turn. So these 2 slip stitches, 1, 2, we will not work any stitches into those slip stitches. We will begin our round 2 into this stitch right here. And here we're working into the back loops. So it's single crochets into the back loops only, into all stitches. Continue on to the end of the round. I've completed round 2 of my ribbing and I have 10 stitches. Round 3, chain 1 and turn. Work single crochets into the back loops to the end of the round. Now you'll find that the sleeve at the bottom is rather wide. So this all depends on your preference. I'd like to tighten up on my sleeve even further. So what I do is I try to lose a stitch along this bottom edge of my sleeve, and to do that I slip stitch 3 times into the bottom edge. Now sometimes I find that if it's extremely wide here, maybe I'll work my ribbing all around into working 3 slip stitches at the bottom edge, and then sometimes I choose to alternate between working 2 slip stitches and working 3 slip stitches. That all depends on your preference. So into that next stitch, slip stitch, that's 1, then the next one 2, and the next one 3, and turn. So for round 4, I'm going to skip those 3 slip stitches, 1, 2, 3, and begin my round right here. And I'll work single crochets into the back loops only. So you'll continue on all around the sleeve edge to complete the ribbing. I'll do this off camera and get back to you when I'm joining my ribbing. I've worked the ribbing all around the sleeve edge. So I did find that working 2 slip stitches did not work for me. I went ahead to work 3 slip stitches for all my rounds. Now you may end at the top edge here or at the bottom edge. To close up the ribbing, it's exactly the same. You'll know when to close the ribbing up is once these 2 edges, they meet. Okay, so if you've ended at the bottom edge like I've done here, you can go right at the bottom there and slip stitch once more. And then for ending at the bottom edge or at the top edge, it's the same. You'll chain 1, and then you'll go into the stitch from the one side and then pick up the stitch on the next side and slip stitch. Then again into the stitch from one side, into the stitch from the next side and slip stitch. Continue on to join all your stitches by slip stitching. Once you get to the end, you can fasten off and cut off the excess yarn. You'll repeat the steps for the second sleeve. Now that our sleeves are complete, both of them, we'll go ahead and fit the pockets. Here I have pockets that I've worked. All I've done here was start off with a foundation double crochet round, and for myself I worked 24 stitches. That's in a multiple of 3. You can go smaller or longer as need be. For children's sizes, you would definitely need to go smaller because that's going to give you the depth of the pocket, your foundation, the number of stitches you use for your foundation double crochet. And thereafter I continued on with the pattern as I did for my front and back panel, working as many rounds to get to the width of my sleeve. So I've worked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 rounds in total, and I've worked 2 pockets. I left behind a long enough tail ends. That's to help with the seaming of the pocket. For the placement of the pocket, you need to fit on the cardigan, and get the right placement. You want a comfortable placement for your pocket. So that's exactly what I did. And now that I have it in place, I can go ahead and seam my pocket into place, leaving the top edge of the pocket unseamed. So I'll seam around these 3 sides. With our pockets in place, we'll go ahead and work the ribbings at the bottom of the cardigan and one for the collar at the neckline. Now, for the ribbing at the bottom of the cardigan, I already went ahead and worked this ribbing, and all I did here was attach yarn at one of the edges right at the bottom. I then worked 1 round of single crochets, and then I chained a chain of 11 and worked the ribbing just as I had worked the ribbing for along the sides, the front openings of my cardigan. Now here you will see that when you are working those single crochets across, there are no stitches to work into. You work your stitches evenly across the bottom of the cardigan, and then you'll go ahead and chain your 11 and continue on with the ribbing. I'll show you how this is done for the collar. The only difference is with the collar, I chose to work more stitches for my ribbing. Here I kept it at 11 chains here, but for my ribbing I will work 21 chains, and that's just to sort of make this collar a lot wider than the ribbing itself. But the pattern is the same for both the ribbing at the collar and at the bottom of the cardigan. It's just that the number of chains we use is different. For the one at the bottom of the cardigan, it's 11 chains, and for the one at the neckline of the cardigan, I use 21 chains. So right at the one edge of this collar of my, the neckline of this cardigan, here you see it, you can attach yarn, and again I'm using my 6mm hook. Then it's chain 1. We'll be working single crochets across. Into that same stitch from where the chain 1 comes out of, single crochet. Continue on with single crochets all along this top edge of the cardigan. You'll see that you have stitches along the ribbing that you can work into, but once you get to the neckline, the portion of this cardigan, the top of it, you'll see that there are no stitches. You need to work your stitches into the little gaps along the top edge, and you work your stitches as evenly spaced so that they are all uniform. Continue on to the opposite side of the neckline right here. I've worked those single crochets along this top edge of the neckline. So for my chain on the ribbing, it's chain 21. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. And that gives me a rather wide collar. If you'd like yours less wide, you can go shorter on the chains or even longer if you'd like it wider. Right, into the second chain from the hook, single crochet. Then it's continue on with single crochets into all chains. I've worked those single crochets along this chain, so then it's turn. Now we need to join our ribbing to the top edge of our neckline. So into that next stitch, slip stitch once, and then into the next stitch, slip stitch again. Then it's turn, skip your 2 slip stitches and work your single crochets into the back loops only to complete this round of the ribbing. So working this ribbing is exactly the same as you had done for your front panels. You continue on until you reach the end of the neckline on the opposite side. I've now completed this collar on this cardigan, so I fastened off, and at this point I can weave in all my ends. So with your yarn needle, the whole idea is to get these ends into the wrong side of the cardigan. So you go back and forth into your stitches to lose these ends. And you'll do the same with all the loose ends.